On to our main set, where we're going to fly through our 7 most common race day swim problems, and Coach Joe is going to help us troubleshoot what to do if we're in the water and we encounter one of these 7 problems. And Joe, common swim problem number 1 is something going wrong with your goggles. This is usually your goggles fogging up. This can be your goggles getting knocked off. And Joe, we can also kind of group swim cap problems into this one as well. Sometimes a swim cap will actually tear when you're putting it on race morning. That's never good. Sometimes your swim cap and your goggles can get knocked around while you're swimming. So Coach Joe, if we have problems with our goggles or with our swim cap, just our head covering setup, what should we do when we're out in the water and this happens?
Well, one thing I want to preface before we get into all of these, what we talk about, these go wrongs, there's a way I approach this with my athletes when it comes to swim, bag, run, all triathlon, as far as we're not going to frame it as what's going to go wrong. We're going to talk about the what ifs.
I love that.
And so the way I prep an athlete for a half or a full Ironman is to have them come up with their scariest thoughts about like top 10 what ifs during the race. When we talk those out and have a plan of action and a practice plan of action as to what we're going to do if we have a flat, if we have mechanical on the bike, if we have a panic attack in the water, if we cramp on the run, all of these things are ifs, what ifs. May not happen, could happen, but they become a lot less scary when we talk about and practice what we're going to do in each of those situations. So for this podcast, we're going to frame these as what ifs. What if this happens in the water? What if my goggles fog up? And I think when you frame it that and you prepare for it and talk it out, it makes handling a race, because the truth is these days are very, very long, whether it's a half or a full, nothing goes perfectly. And so when you've talked a lot about these things that you're worried about, they become a lot less scary, and you know what to do, and you learn to handle them when they occur, and they don't derail you for the rest of the day. So that's my preface on it.
And
Now
Joe,
we're
I just
talking
want to
about.
step in there.
Yeah.
Because Jeff Boer, CEO of TriDot, when he coached junior triathletes, which he doesn't do now, but he did for decades. He would always tell his juniors going into a race, plan on 3 things going wrong during this event, whether it's short course, whether it's long course, whether it's middle distance, plan on 3 things going wrong. And so when they go wrong, just like you're saying, Joe, it's not getting out of sorts. It's not, oh, shoot, that happened. It's not, oh, crap, there goes my day. There's the first one.
Mhm.
There's the second one.
Yeah.
There's the third one. I
Yeah.
knew they were coming. I didn't know what it was going to be. But that mentality, just like what you're saying, it's just a what if. It's just something to troubleshoot along the way. And it's if you go into the day planning on that being part of the day and part of the journey, it's not going to throw you nearly as much. So I love that, Joe.
Yeah.
And I haven't said this yet, but this is kind of episode 1 in a series. And 2 days from now, I'm recording with TriDot coach Kurt Madden, and we're going to have the same conversation for the bike. What are the most common things that go wrong on the bike? We're going to have the same conversation about the run, same conversation about race day nutrition. And so, Joe, I love you establishing this as the mindset heading into all these conversations. So just wanted to stop and just thanks for that.
And a little trick that I've used for myself, and it helps me mentally during these races and all of these that I've done these years. But I even speak out loud when something happens. I tend to giggle because I've still said it for like 20 years. Say I like on Saturday got hit in the face during the swim. You get discombobulated. I'll say to myself, reset, reset. And I laugh because I still do it. Or like I almost get clipped on the bike and my nerves get rattled, and I say, reset, breathe, reset, breathe. And when I do, it kind of triggers my mind to say, get back to it, girl. Don't let this derail you. So like kind of talking, it's a kind of a self-talk the whole time, but resetting, you're going to reset 100 times during the day from little things that are happening. So that's just a little tool to use to mentally kind of say it to yourself, reset, breathe, and then let's get back to it. But we were talking about goggles themselves. There's so many issues with goggles fogging. This is something that's so controllable. That's what's easy. Everybody has a preference as to what you apply to your inside of your goggles. There are a lot of anti-fog products. Some people like baby shampoo. Some people like to spit in their goggles. If you're going to go real cheap, but I'm a fan of foggies. They're wipes that you wipe out the inside of your goggles. They're multi-purpose, so they're amazing on your aero helmet shield as well as sunglasses. So if you give a quick wipe to all of those things before putting them in your bags or setting up your transition, you will have no problem with fogging of the goggles. So Andrew, I don't know if you've tried those things, but it really is helpful to prevent that, because there's nothing like getting out and not being able to sight or see anything with fogging. And in warmer climates, we're used to that here in Texas. Everything fogs up real quick with our
Yeah, it does.
100% humidity. Yeah. Uh, so that is an issue with goggles. Another one is them breaking, them getting lost. I mean, that sounds like a nightmare, right? Um, and this goes back to a story. One of longtime athlete that I've coached, Jeanette Anderson. She's done quite a few Ironmans under my coaching, but she is hilarious. One of my best friends, but she's out at the lake, and I'm trying to get her. I was like, today you're going to swim, 4,200. We're gonna swim this consistently as a confidence booster and prep for Ironman. She gets back to the dock. She's pooped, tired. She swam the 4,200. And I, take the goggles from her, and I'm like, going back in. And she looked at me with like,
Go do another
what? And
lap.
I said,
No goggles.
we're going to do one lap without those goggles. And I mean, and she did it. And when she came out, she was very appreciative, but she was mad. But she said, I said, you never know what's going to happen. And that would probably be one of the worst things that can happen in a swim, is that, you do lose your
Yeah.
goggles. I mean, you're losing your sight at that point. But is it going to kill your race? Absolutely not. You practiced this, you did it, and you can. If you've got a breaststroke, if you've got a backstroke, you're going to get through that swim. And so it's a good idea. It's really hard, but set them on the pool deck. Set them on the pool deck. Do 100, do 200. Just a little bit of practice to know that you can do it if something happens to those goggles.
Yeah, no, I
Um,
absolutely love that, Joe. And I kind of my cheat code here, Joe, is I've actually never used the foggies myself, and I usually don't have issues on race day, and largely that's because I just go in the race day with a new set of goggles. Right. And particularly for my A races, right? If I'm doing a half Ironman or an Ironman, Joe, you and I actually swim in the same pair of race goggles. We,
yes.
we know what they are. We love them. They fit our face well. And so I'm not
Yeah.
trying something new on race day. It's a new pair of my favorite goggle. And when they are new, they have the manufacturer anti-fog stuff on there. It's
Yeah.
untouched. No one's done anything with it. And I've never had a race day problem with new goggles. If I have my goggles fog up, it's because I'm doing a local sprint or Olympic, and I don't spring for a new set of goggles. I use the ones I've been training in, where I could
Yes.
prevent it ahead of time by using foggies that I've just never used. So I should try that next time I go short course for sure.
Yep. And the other two things I think about, as far as goggles go, you have to do what makes you most comfortable in a swim. If the security of having a second pair tucked into your wetsuit or swim skin, if that helps you, then that's fine.
Yeah.
A lot of my athletes ask me, do I bring it on a half? I'm usually like, it's up to you. I've never done that. And if it makes you more comfortable, then so be it. Tuck an extra pair in. I think the most common thing that happens with goggles is due to the contact we experience in these massive swims, is to get knocked in the face, and to have that happen to me Saturday late into the swim. And it can be rattling, but again, it's one of those resettlements where you've got to sit up, you've got to make sure you cleared that goggle of water, because now you've got water in the eye, all of it. Shake it out, put it back on, and try to get back to flat body position as fast as you can. If you've sustained an injury, if you've really been cold cocked, which has happened to me before, there is no shame and there's no penalty for getting to a kayak and to hanging on
Yeah.
and to make
Good
sure
point.
that you've got that, making sure you've got them right. That's happened to a number of my athletes, and it's perfectly fine to grab hold of a buoy rope or the kayak and get yourself secure so that you can reset the goggles and then proceed with the swim.
Yeah, I think every race forward I've ever done, it obviously depends on the race producer, what their rules are. But I don't think I've
Yeah.
ever done a race where this was not the case. The rule is generally you can grab onto support kayak, support watercraft, support, of course,
Yep.
buoys. You cannot advance yourself on those items, but you can grab on, sit there, reset, do what you need to do.
Good.
So great suggestion, Joe. And yeah, anytime I've ever had something go wrong with my goggles, like maybe there's a slight leak, I need to clear some water, or the times in a local Sprinter Olympic where I do have some fogging, yeah, I'll just stop for a second, I'll tread water, I'll clear that goggle, I'll get it back on, I'll keep going. And that's probably your answer for 90% of the things that do go wrong out there. It's just kind of reset,
Right.
clear the goggle and keep
Reset.
going. And Joe, you already kind of are getting into common swim problem number two. So I'll go ahead and identify what that is. And that is experiencing big time contact with another swimmer. And sometimes, like you just said, that can affect your goggle setup because it's a direct strike to the face. But this can be getting kicked, getting punched, getting slapped, getting dunked, swam over, sideswiped, T-boned. It's all on the table out there. People get swam over. People just get walloped in the side and lose their breath. Um, if we take some big time contact, what do we do? How do we handle it?
I think the first thing is always self check. I mean, you have to kind of evaluate. You've got to keep your bearings and say, "Am I injured? Am I in pain? Or am I just stunned?" Most of the time, we're just stunned. We're not injured. And in those situations, that's a reset moment. But I tend to focus on I need to find space. I need to find space for myself. So that's okay to sit up for a moment. If you are in the mix of mayhem, like thousands of swimmers, there's just no room to swim. Maybe that means scooting to the left or right, get to the side, find some space for yourself. You don't want to battle. I tend to start the swim up front. There's a lot of big guys that think they're going to win the Ironman that day. I mean, they're all set to beat Christian Blumenfeld on
Yeah,
from
they
the
are.
moment the gun blows, they're out to dominate that swim. And it's I tend it tends to fuel me when I get cold cocked, and I tend to have choice words for some
Do you ever
but
retaliate,
I
Joe? Just kind of give them an elbow or let them
oh
know,
I've
hey, someone's
said
over here.
Yeah, I've said things underwater thinking, "Can they hear me? Can they hear my words?" But I have to tend to rein myself in and think, "Okay, what am I doing in this moment? I'm not injured. I'm going to scoot to the side of this big guy because I don't want to battle him anymore. He's kicked me. He's all of the things. But if in the instance that you do feel like you've suffered an injury, I had an instance, I think it was in Cozumel one year, where I contemplated whether I had a broken nose. I mean, there are situations where, and sometimes it takes a few minutes where slow your stroke down, focus on swim form, breathe every stroke to your natural side, make sure you're securing good inhale and exhale, because sometimes that will alleviate pain and kind of bring you back to a center where you're like, I'm okay. I'm okay. It's kind of settling yourself down. In those moments, your adrenaline spikes, your heart rate spikes. You don't want to just gun it because that's not good for you as far as the full swim or the full day. So kind of reining yourself back and kind of checking on yourself, seeing if you're okay to continue. If you are not okay to continue, you're going to know pretty quickly. And that's when you need to be smart about safety and your own health and flagging down help or getting to a kayak. Um, Contact is just that's the name of the game. It is a lot better than it used to be when we had mass starts. So I encourage guys out there, girls out there to be respectful of other swimmers around them. We're not going to win it in that first 500 yards of the Ironman. So having some courtesy and care for those around you is important.
Yeah, I love that, Joe. Everything you just said there, and that's the big thing here is just if you get struck in a major way, self evaluate, collect yourself, get some space if you need to, and then when you're ready, get back to in the water moving forward again, assuming there's no injuries or anything like that. But I love Joe you mentioning just the breathing. Collect yourself when you do get back to swimming. Make sure you're as comfortable as possible, breathing to your favorite side. Whatever it takes, right, to get moving again and feel confident and comfortable again. And I find for myself, I've never had like a huge, thankfully, in 30-ish triathlons, I've never had huge contact to the face. I've never been kicked really hard, hit really hard, swam over, dunked. I've had contact for sure, but usually you can tell it's just somebody who's swimming. They're not breathing to the side where they see that you're there. Their arm happens to hit your body, hit your leg. Their foot happens to make contact as they're kind of going by you at a weird direction, a weird angle. And I have to remind myself, like it's not personal. They just didn't see me. They have no idea I'm right there in the water. And so sometimes I'll just give like a slight little shove, right? Just to create a little space for myself to let them know, hey,
Yes.
somebody is right here. And I've been on the other side of that, right? You're swimming along, you think you're all alone, and all of a sudden you feel your arm hit somebody. Oh, shoot. So sorry, I didn't know you were there. Look over. And,
Yeah.
and so it's just, we're all trying to figure it out in the dark, right? We're all looking down in the water, not always aware of where each other are. So just don't take it personally, unless it is
Yeah.
personal, because sometimes it is personal, but that's a different story. Just making faces. Comment, but before we encourage fighting in the water, common swim problem number 3 is having your muscles cramp or seize up or tingle a little bit while you're swimming. Cramps are obviously never fun on race day in any of the disciplines, but they can be extra bothersome when we're in the water. Coach Joe, what should we do if we start feeling a muscle cramp up a little bit?
This is a very tricky subject because a lot of triathletes have, asked me and say, I don't cramp any other time, or
Yeah,
I barely swam 200 yards. And, I can give all the token answers as to say, make sure you take a salt tab before you get in the water. Make sure, you've had bananas and your potassium and sodium are high. It seems not to come back to what they've taken in. I've tried to analyze it a bunch in my head. A lot of times I think we are, so full of adrenaline and nerves. There's a lot of muscle contraction when we start the swim. Due to ankle flexibility, a lot of people have far more flexed foot when they're kicking. And I think a lot of these factors lean into them experiencing muscle cramps in the foot and in the calf. That's
yeah,
the most common that I see it. Um, what I've tried to practice with my athletes is to have them, again, we're practicing to prevent cramping during a race situation, but even practicing to prevent it during workouts is to have them practice with a kickboard this relaxed kicking, meaning I want you to sit in a chair and I want you to or stand and practice like you're kicking a soccer ball. Like the flexion of the ankle would be just like kind of floppy feet. Um, and they think it's kind of silly when I have them practice it, but I'm like, okay, now we've done it on dry land. Let's take it to a kickboard, hands at 10 and 2, head out of the water. I want you to just focus on a really relaxed flexion of the foot, like you're kicking a soccer ball. And then they try to mirror that when they're doing their stroke. Again, this sounds silly, but the more and more they practice that, that's a muscle memory thing. It's the same
yeah,
thing with when I talk about a beat of a kick and how your beat of a kick, relates to your pull. You can't master a beat of a kick unless you've practiced that a tremendous amount in the pool. And to master that, that just becomes muscle memory of how we're going to kick to a beat. So it's the same thing with relaxing the feet, that flexion of the ankle. And the more and more you practice it, that becomes your kick when you're racing in open water. Um, this kind of relates back to what we talked about when you get cold cocked or hit during the swim. If you do experience cramping in a race, you're at one of those what if moments. What am I going to do? Again, reset. But this is where the breathe comes really into play. This is where you have to think, I need to focus on getting as flat as possible, push my chest down, take some of the weight off my hips and legs, let them kind of float behind me. Make this more of an upper body stroke at this moment. Let me get really flat, focus on a strong pull. And I'm going to give my legs a little bit of a break for a minute. They're going to kind of just flail behind me for a little bit.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
when yeah. And when you breathe natural side, every stroke fully oxygenated, we can often let those calf foot calm down a little bit.
Yeah, and that's like 100% of the time when I have cramping in the pool or the open water, it's foot or calf. 100% of the time. Some of you,
Mhm.
you're spot on there.
Yeah.
I have very stiff ankles. I'm aware of that. Like my right ankle, usually when I'm in the pool, like the second or third time I push off the wall and go to kick, like there's like a pop in my ankle at some point.
Yeah.
I don't know what's wrong with it. It just it happens, right? So yeah, when this happens to me on race day, it's exactly what you're talking about. It's you start feeling. It's not like a Charlie horse sees up, right? It's usually those muscles kind of just letting you know, like I'm not used to doing this for this long in this weird position. And the more you swim, the more you get in the pool, the more you go longer distances, the more your body gets used to it. Love all your suggestions, Joe, for
Yeah.
how to even try to prevent that before you get in a race situation. And if you're in a race situation, like as you're going through the body cues of just okay, put more onto your arms, relax your body, relax
Yeah.
your legs. Like I found myself just like trying to rehearse that sitting here at my desk, because
Yes.
just keep moving forward.
I
And
mean, this
I've
is one
never
thing.
had Joe. I've never gotten onto the bike or the run and had those cramps follow me. It's very unique to being horizontal in the water, and once you're out of that situation, like your legs kind of return. The blood flow returns to normal,
Right.
and your legs return to normal. So, common swim problem number 4. This is what kind of my story from the warm up question: suffering a panic attack or other form of fight or flight anxiety during a swim. This can happen to beginners as well as experienced triathletes like myself. It can be somewhat expected, like you went into the swim already nervous, and so you thought you might freak out, or it can be unexpected, like it was for me when I got into the water, having never had any issues before. But Joe, if we're in the water and we start to panic, feel nervous, feel claustrophobic, I know a lot of people in their first wetsuit swim, they feel claustrophobic. You've got a wetsuit, neoprene hugging your body, you've got a swim cap on, you've got goggles on. People can lose their heads a little bit. What do we do if this happens to us in the water?
And this is another one. This is probably the one I get most questions about, and
Okay.
and a lot of athletes experience this. And the thing that's amazing about this, you can be the most advanced swimmer. You can be a collegiate swimmer who is triathlon, and they'll experience it for the first time, and they're like, I don't know what happened to me. I'm a very gifted swimmer. So anxiety, panic attack can sneak up on anybody in life and in the pool. And so, it
Preach,
is,
girl.
it,
Yeah.
this is one thing that I do always, kind of all of these issues we're talking about, I relate back to before we race, what is going on. And that's where when I coach athletes as to open water swimming and as to the what if of what happens when we have a panic attack or anxiety, I relate it back to there's going to be anxiety all day. But usually that anxiousness or that those extreme nerves are starting way before we start the race. um, and so, if we can somehow calm our nervous system, lower our heart rate, distract ourselves a little bit from the race environment around us, kind of introspectively, calm ourselves, we're much more likely, if we're in a calmer state to start the race, to be less anxious. That's building. If we are all nerves, about to throw up, all of these things as we start the race, we're setting ourselves up to be very anxious, to experience a panic attack, to be set off at any moment when if someone touches us or if someone grabs us or we can't catch our breath, all of those things. And you're so sick of hearing me talk about it, but when I do talk about box breathing, yoga technique of controlling our breath, calming our nervous system. Anyone can Google box breathing or
Yeah.
check it out on YouTube. There's lots of people that talk about it, a lot of yogis out there. It's a technique I use when I'm flying because I'm not a good flyer. Those are things that you can use in all aspects of life that help you in situations that are just very rattling. And so I encourage. I mean, I had a guy that just did Texas, and I mean, to have him have to, the house I just moved to is on a lake, so I had a lot of my swimmers out practicing with me at my own house. And but to have this big guy, I'm like, okay, we're going to stand here together and practice box breathing. Um, and he was like, oh, I mean, like it was such an eye opening
Yeah.
experience for him. I said, use this in all aspects of life, but I will guarantee you, if you practice it for the 10 minutes that you are walking in that line to enter the water, you're going to be in a much better place when you enter that water. You're going to feel calm. I tell them two things: we're going to box breathe for 10 minutes, and then we're going to smile when we hit that water because we've made it. We've survived the training and we've made it. In that state, it still happens that these happen in the water. Our goggles get knocked off. We inhale water, we get hit. Um, Panic attack is very, 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 very common. I don't want people to feel like they can't enter triathlon or they'll never be able to do a swim because they've experienced panic attacks or anxiety in the water. It has happened to everyone. What do we do in those situations? This is a very, very important thing, is that we have a go-to plan. And I make them repeat it to me. What is your go-to plan? And you're going to panic. What are you going to do? Some people, that's, I got to flip on my back. I got to take some deep breaths. Other people is, I've got a breaststroke. I had an athlete, she'll know who she is, Tiffany Galata, who said, came out of Ironman Texas and said, I side stroked the whole thing. I mean, sometimes you
Got
have
it
to do
done.
what you have to do.
Yeah, got it done.
If you're experienced, yes. And so go to plan is important, but it's not effective unless it is practiced. So,
Love that.
jokingly during swim sessions with, my athletes, as we're working on stroke at the pool, I yell, go to. They know exactly what that means. Some are flipping on their back, some are breaststroking, some are getting us to the lane rope as fast as they can. Nothing wrong with looking for a kayak or a buoy and resetting, saying, I need 3 minutes right here to be able to breathe without being underwater. And I need to calm myself down and my heart rate down. And then I can get back to swimming. So, if I can emphasize anything the most, it's that go to plan has to be practiced. And I still practice mine. So, I really want athletes out there to formulate that go-to plan for themselves, or send me questions about how do I figure out what's best for me, and then talk about practicing that so that you can implement it when it comes to race day.
Yeah, absolutely love that, Joe. And I think for me, when I was experiencing that in Daytona, and this is easy for me to say because it was a race I was doing for fun, to be a part of the Triathlon community there in Daytona. I wasn't gunning for a certain time or a PR or something, but these can be moments where if you're so caught up on swimming a certain time or hitting a certain time on the day, and you've had one, two, three mini panic attacks and you're out of breath and you're struggling in the water, and if you're still holding on to that goal, is that like at a certain point, like you almost have to switch mindsets to let me just
Yes.
finish this swim and
Yes.
just let your, because that will
Buoy to
relax.
buoy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let me get to the next buoy. That's a great point, Joe. Really chunk it. Let me get to the next buoy and try to stay
Mhm.
relaxed, keep your head in the water, breathe to your favorite side, all the things we're talking about. And then once you're out of the water, okay, well let's return to, let's evaluate where we're at with our time, and maybe you can keep the A goal, maybe you move on to the B goal. But yeah, at a certain
Right.
point, like if you're trying to hold on to something that is continuing to trigger more getting out of breath, more feeling anxious, more panic attacks, let that go and let the next buoy and that swim finish line, that swim out be the next goal. So
And
love that,
there is
Joe.
there's one
Go ahead.
more thing I want to mention here, because sometimes we don't find ourselves in a full-blown panic attack, or crawling out of our skin situation, but we can feel it sneaking up. We
Yeah.
can feel
Yep.
nerves. This applies to a lot of things that we experience in these what if moments, but a lot of it is distraction. This is really psychology behind swimming. It is distraction. If we can trick the mind into focusing on something else, the mind doesn't have time to be focusing on, oh my God, I'm getting nervous. Now I feel like I can't breathe. I feel like I'm out of breath. All of these sneaky thoughts that creep into us. And the two things that have been most effective when it comes to coaching athletes for me has been counting stroke. Counting stroke. If you can say, I'm going to count 50 strokes, there is something about refocusing that shifts your mind away from nerves, and feeling like I can't. My day's over. It's all coming down on me right now in this moment. For other people, a mantra or repeating something that's comforting words, or humming and singing a song. Something about humming reverses those feelings of anxiousness. People will hum because it's a calming mechanism that kids do. You see them hum if they're nervous. So those are a couple of things that I encourage, but again, all of them have to be practiced. So getting out in open water, getting in some current, getting in some choppy water, those are great experiences for being like, okay, I'm starting to feel a little bit of nerves here. I'm going to go ahead and sing, the next song from Jelly Roll. I don't know. Just you're gonna, whatever it is for you. But sometimes picking a favorite song, it's hard to sing that song and focus on the nerves that are building.
I've done quite a bit of people watching as I swim. I'm sure you have as well. I mean, just
Yeah.
start focusing on the people around you, and count how many people you see with the same wetsuit as you. Like, oh, there's a
Yes.
sailfish, there's a sailfish, there's a roca. You might notice somebody and be like, oh man, that guy's got a ridiculous like stroke. Like, and just start. I mean, start watching how
Yes.
people swim and start noticing the people and the things around you. Ironman Waco, Joe. You and I both raced Ironman Waco
Yeah.
on the banks of the Brazos River. They have animal statues like every couple hundred
Yes.
yards. And so it's like, oh, there's the beaver statue up there because the zoo in Waco is up the road. So I think it's kind of like part of the zoo park experience. But anyway, it's
Yeah.
so start sightseeing, right? Start people watching. Whatever it takes to get your mind off of whatever's freaking you out a little bit. Coach Joe, common swim problem number 5 is dealing with the effects of cold water. We could talk about extra warm water a little bit as well, but I think cold water is more what people struggle with a little bit more frequently. In Texas, we deal with warm water quite a bit. But Joe, this can be numbness in the arms and legs that people experience. This can be getting body shivers as you're swimming. This can be even the early signs of hypothermia. But if we're out in the
Yes.
water and we find ourselves being impacted by the cold water, what should we do?
Yeah, this is one, in all my years of racing, I think that the toughest race and the effects of cold water, what I guess probably Arizona, I think that was 2 years ago. I think the water was about 57 degrees. Um, it's very tricky in dealing with that. Some of us hate cold. I hate cold. I'd rather not swim in a wetsuit 100%. But get on a given day, you're given a very cold swim. And I know you've experienced those too, Andrew. There is a number of things we can do physically to prep ourselves for a cold swim. Secondly, there are those mental tricks that we some of them we've already talked about. You know, swimming in cold water pre-race is great. The shock value of entering that water, how it feels, kind of takes your breath away. The burning on the face, all of these things, the burning on the hands, and we feel. Racing St. George, for instance, it was a great idea to get in the water 2 times before the race there because it wasn't as shocking. It didn't. My nerves were much more settled. I knew what I was going to experience. So that's a number one. Number two is what can we do to the body itself to keep it as warm as possible before we enter that water? We want to start out as warm as possible before we hit that water because we're going to lose body heat real quick. One great thing, my friend and co-coach John Mayfield has always talked about. A thermos of warm water. Sounds silly, but I was the first one in Arizona to pour that down my wetsuit to get that warm water in my body. Your body continues to warm that water. When you enter the water, you then have this barrier. You do. Of course, cold water is going to enter the wetsuit, but it's super tight, and you have that layer of warm water already keeping your body warmer. Secondly, what are we going to do to protect our face? Exposed areas, and that's going to be go ahead and lube up. You're going to need to take Aquifer, Vaseline, something that's a barrier or a skin protectant. And it's gross. I mean, I Vaselined my face, my hands. I didn't do the palms because you're not going to be able to grip anything for the next
Sure.
4 days if you do too much Vaseline. But the back of your hands, your feet, your ankles, neck, anything that's going to be exposed, it creates a barrier and it keeps you warmer. Lastly, well, two more things. You see sometimes swimmers swim in booties or skull caps. Skull cap is it's not uncomfortable. That's in Coeur d'Alene. I did wear a skull cap due to the water temperature. Booties are a little bit, they fill with water and they cause a lot of drag. So that's very tricky unless you get some super good fitting booties to protect your feet. And then lastly is a double cap. A double cap is a great idea. Even if you take a latex under a silicone, they don't have to, that combination, latex and silicone, has worked well for me. They don't slip, but it definitely keeps the head warmer and we lose a lot of body warmth through our scalp, through the head. So that works well. So now you've completely covered yourself with Vaseline, warm water, a wetsuit, double cap. You're as warm as possible, but also layering. Don't be standing out there in your kit with your wetsuit down. When it's 40 degrees outside. Stay
Yeah.
warm. Keep socks on. Keep your feet covered until the last possible moment when you take those things off. Um, Now, mentally, when we get in the water, we're going to have that shock moment no matter what we do. And
Sure.
it goes back to everything we've talked about. Focusing on body position. I'm going to stay as flat as possible. I'm going to breathe to my natural side every stroke. I'm going to keep as much oxygen in this body as I can because that's going to calm my nervous system. That's going to keep my breath under control and keep my heart rate down. Cold will cause, nerves, heart rate, all of that's going to kind of go into what you said, that scary mode of what am I going to do at this point? But focusing on breathing every stroke is going to keep you calmer. And lastly, I have so much I could talk about this. I could go on for 17 days. So I'm trying to concise
Joe,
it
this is
into
why
like
I only booked you for this episode. I don't need anybody else for this. Joe can
now
cover
we're
it all.
all she's a talker, man. She can talk. I mean, I'm just like, shut up. But when I talk about the distraction mechanism when it comes to cold, it's a game changer because that's something you should practice. In that, I'm going to count my strokes or check out, the wetsuits around me or landmarks. You've got to have something. Singing for me was a big one during Arizona because I was like, I think I sang. I am so cold. Like, I mean, I think it became a song that I created. But anything to kind of make me laugh and to lessen the severity of the moment is going to help you.
Yeah, love all of that, Joe. And just it's almost like marginal gains on the bike, right? Like we look for ways to marginally be a little bit faster on the bike. You're talking about trying pairing
Yeah.
5, 6, 7 different ways to be marginally warmer on your swim and letting all of that
Yes.
kind of help see you through to the finish. The most I've ever done personally is the double swim cap. I did that, escape from Alcatraz. I did that 70.3 degrees when the water was cold. I personally don't mind cold water, but I know some people at Ironman Arizona. There was an athlete I was chatting with before the race, and her plan, she had this plan, Joe. Her plan, not like your cold water, Ironman Arizona is not a race where you can get in the water before the race. So, like you said, if you can have access to the water, that's great. But some races you don't have that. So her plan was to get into the water, and before she started swimming, before she did anything else, she was going to dunk herself under, kind of sit there for a second, feel what the temp was, and then start going.
Exactly.
And she did that. She got through it okay. I think she was pretty cold by the end, but she got through it. That was her way of okay. Before I start trying to swim with a shocked system, let me shock my system. Let me acclimate to what the
Yes.
temperature of the water is, and then start going. So, if you go in with a plan, and like Joe said, have a plan for what am I going to do when I start shivering a little bit on the swim. I'm going to distract myself. I'm going to double down on my warming measures. I might pee in my wetsuit, whatever, whatever
Yeah.
it takes. Lots of good stuff there. So, two more common swim problems to talk about. This next one, Joe, is common swim problem number 6. This is experiencing chafing or rubbing from your wetsuit. I personally, Joe, have only had this problem on salt water races, and I don't race in salt water often enough to remember that. And so I almost always end up getting chafed from saltwater events. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. This is salt water. I should
Yes.
have done more. But talk to us about it's one thing, I think, to notice it after the swim, like the next day or something. But if we're out there and we can feel the rubbing begin to happen and it starts to become
Yeah.
bothersome, what should we do?
Definitely. It's always that aha moment when you get in the shower after the race and you're like blood curdling because you're like, oh, I didn't know I had that. That's new.
Yeah.
Um, you know, chafing in open water, it's definitely you tend to have that occur a lot more often in those saltwater swims. I mean, I feel like Kona was probably some of the worst chafing in a swim skin of all things, because I just don't think you're expecting that that's going to happen, just due to how different the water is than we're swimming lake or river. Um, Most common areas you're going to see on people is the back of their neck. In salt water, you'll often see the side of the neck. Um, and then for my athletes, often under the arm, as far as wearing a sleeveless wetsuit or a swim skin. So a couple of things. Any anti-chafe product, you can specific anti-chafe products or Aquifer, Vaseline, anything that's cheap. More is better. So make
Yeah.
sure that you've applied it to all those areas that you've experienced it. The chafing in the back of the neck is often due to how much we're sighting, how much of how much tilt we have in our stroke. Now we're sitting up, our chest, upper torso is now rising, head is up. When we lift that neck, we're exposing the back of the neck to just that rough Velcro, that latch on the wetsuit. So most of the time, you'll realize that you sighted a whole bunch when you have chafing back there. So ways to prevent that is getting better at sighting. And we talk about this. You just mentioned you can see wetsuits to your left and right. If you can see swimmers to their left and right, you're in the right spot. It becomes habit to pick our head up every three strokes
Yeah.
because we have fear. We are blind and we
Where's
can't
that
see where we're
buoy?
going.
Am I going toward the
Yeah,
buoy?
or is of course, but getting to practicing where you are swimming with other swimmers around you, having a group and saying we're going to swim from here to that point in the lake or that buoy. When you do that and you could see swimmers to your left and right, you don't need to pick your head up. Try counting to 50 before you pick your head up. So, kind of eliminating that unnecessary sighting will help prevent the chafing on the back of the neck. Um, I had a couple more things. Let me think on this for a second. Oh, yeah. Specifically, what I've used, and it's been very helpful, is sports tape, rock tape. When people just inevitably are going to chafe and it's going to derail the rest of their race. I had an athlete who had severe chafing, on the upper part of underneath the arm that, then running became very, very, very painful
Yeah.
for the rest of the Ironman. So when you know that's going to happen, rock tape will not come off during an Ironman event. So putting a small section on the back of your neck or on the side of your neck, if you're going to be in salt water, swim skin, or underneath those arm, it's going to save you tremendous amount of pain. And so if you always do, use the rock tape, and it will be very helpful in preventing that chafing.
Yeah, I know another thing to look out for, Joe, is when you are putting your swim skin on, you're putting your wetsuit on, make sure there's no Velcro exposed to your body. If you're putting it on properly, right, having somebody help you and make sure the
Yes.
leash is squared away properly and the Velcro isn't touching you. That I think the first time I ever had it's called a wetsuit hickey, right? When your wetsuit like
Yeah.
burns you somewhere on your neck,
Yeah.
and they call it a wetsuit hickey. My very first open water event and Lake Rockwall in the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex. I had a wetsuit hickey rolling to work on Monday after that race, Olympic distance triathlon, and I didn't secure the wetsuit properly. It was the
Yeah.
exact spot where there's the Velcro attached. And I was just too novice at the time to know to look for that. And now I know,
Yeah.
okay, make sure someone gets eyes on my wetsuit to make sure the leash and all that jazz isn't going to be rubbing my neck throughout that event. And two, I think the other time I've really had it happen is again in salt water or if I'm wearing like a sleeveless tri suit or even a sleeve tri suit.
Yeah.
Know where your
Yeah.
zippers are. Know where the stitching is. Because if you've got your triathlon suit on under that wetsuit, and maybe you put your lubrication in the right spots where your wetsuit comes into contact, but you didn't lube where the edge of your tri suit is. That can also rub
Right.
during a swim event. Then all of a sudden you got all these marks where your tri kit comes into contact with your skin, but not
Right.
your wetsuit. So just be aware of all those contact points, right? And
Yes.
like Joe, like you said, lube them judiciously or
You're
generously.
exactly right. I will say the zipper, the belly button, and the heart rate monitor for women I mean, men
Yeah,
too, but for women, it can be excruciating. So more is better when it comes to anti-chafe
yeah.
products.
Don't be shy with those products.
Don't
Lather up. Joe, common swim problem number 7 is having problems getting your wetsuit on or off. So this isn't really a problem in the water itself, but this is a problem right before you start the race when you're getting the wetsuit on, or in T1 when you're trying to get to the bike portion of the race. Some people get stuck, right? They get stuck. Their foot gets stuck. They have problems just getting that neoprene off and peeling it off quickly and efficiently. I've seen people in transition start to panic, and then their heart rate spikes, and it takes them even longer to get that wetsuit off. So talk to us about this. How can we, even if you're practiced at this, I think it's going to happen. So if you find yourself having wetsuit issues getting it off, what do we do on race day?
You know, this is a really important question, and it's really twofold. So we're talking about getting it on properly. We're talking about getting it off properly. Getting it on. One thing that I relay to my athletes now with how Ironman events are run, half or full, they are lining up athletes way early.
Yeah.
Athletes are getting in line behind their designated sign for swim time very early. Like we're looking at an hour before swim start. So what happens is, you're very nervous, you're not paying very close to time, and then there's a mad rush to get that wetsuit on. So when I talk to them about when that transition is set up and you are at swim site, you are getting that wetsuit on. You're going to get it up to hip at least, so if it's a hot environment
Like
or,
for me, it's once I've gotten to go to the bathroom. Once I've gotten to the bathroom, there's no
once
reason to delay putting the wetsuit on.
you've got wetsuit on, because if it is a good fitting wetsuit, it's going to take 20 minutes to get it feeling perfect.
Yeah.
And that means you have to start way down at the ankle. We need to get this wetsuit as high as possible to ensure, very good shoulder mobility. Nothing sucks more than having it pulling on your shoulders because we didn't get that wetsuit high enough. Often this takes an assistant. We need help. We need somebody, once we've got it up the hip, to give us a really, as Jeanette Anderson or Shannon Cranston will say, who are both tried-out athletes, I need someone to give me a good wedgie on this
I
wetsuit.
want a neoprene wedgie on race day. Absolutely.
Yeah, neoprene
Yeah.
wedgie. Get this sucker as high as we can. So it's very important to allow yourself enough time to get that wetsuit on properly. Part of that is a comfort level of attaching the back of that wetsuit. So, make sure you're not choking yourself out by attaching it. I like to leave it a little bit looser. It gives you a little bit more feeling that you can breathe. So that's important as far as getting it on. Second is baggies on the feet, gloves on the hand. That's helpful for making sure we don't tear that super expensive wetsuit we've just
Yeah.
invested in. And also another technique John Mayfield uses is to pull from the inside of the fabric. So when you have it on your legs and you've got it your ankles into the leg holes, use the interior to pull, and you will not be able to tear the wetsuit
Yeah.
as you're pulling it up. So those are just some techniques. Some people will glide their ankles, lube their ankles and hands, and if it's a very tight wetsuit, to get it on more easily. The question then becomes: we've swam, we're kind of discombobulated, we're coming out of the water, and this is something I have my athletes practice religiously: is pull your goggles up, but don't take them off, because then you've got goggles or swim cap in hand and you're trying to take a wetsuit off.
Yeah,
It
good
just
point.
becomes yeah, you're a hot mess at that point. So the point is, lift them up. Now I can see, not blind, but let's just leave what we have up here
And you
going
have
on.
two
Let's just
hands
leave
to
that
work
as it
with.
is.
Yeah.
Two hands. And
Yeah,
then,
good point.
and as you're finishing that swim, that last 100 yards, mentally, the imagery of what I'm doing step by step. So for me, when I'm swimming in, I'm like, goggles up, unlatch the top, pull the string down. Like, sometimes you got to say these things to yourself, and you're going to have a much faster transition onto the bike, and easier time getting that wetsuit off. So what's helpful to me is to remove the wetsuit and get it down to my hip. I think wetsuit problems and removal were a lot harder when we were going through the pandemic, and we didn't have, I think they're called, hang on, I think they're called, what are they called now? They're not called strippers anymore.
They're not
Um,
wetsuit
no,
strippers. They are wetsuit
no,
peelers.
handlers, maybe.
Pe-
It's
handlers,
been renamed.
peelers.
Peelers. It's peelers. We are now peelers. So peelers, not
Like a
strippers.
banana.
No more.
Like a
Yeah, no
banana.
more strippers at Ironman
No more
races.
strippers.
Who'd have thought? So now we are back to peelers, strippers. Teaching my athletes, take advantage of help when you can get it during a race. So do not be shy. You're going to have to throw yourself down on your back. Once that wetsuit is down to the hip, it is amazing how they can pull a
Yeah,
wetsuit off in 2.5 seconds.
they really
Um,
can.
it, yeah, and then they throw it at you. You're up and you're on your way. There are instances, as I relate back to like Arizona, and that we still weren't having the peelers, assistant in that point. Volunteers can help you in transition. They are allowed to touch you. It's like, if you say, "Can you help me?" They can definitely help you. If you have, for some reason, couldn't get it unlatched or couldn't find the string or your hands are too cold to handle anything, a volunteer can help you if you ask them. That's within the rules. If you're just if you are on your own, getting it down to your hip, it becomes that leg game of which leg can I step on first to pull, and to
Yeah.
get it off. But also, if you're really struggling, don't hesitate to sit down. Let your heart rate come down. Take some deep breaths. You're probably not going to win this race on the 15 seconds you choose to sit down to get that wetsuit off. So, if it's going to make for a smoother transition and a smoother start to getting onto that bike, just settle down for a minute, sit down, and take your time and remove the wetsuit.
Yeah, the only time, Joe, I've ever had a problem getting my wetsuit off is if it gets caught on my timing chip around my ankle, right? Because we can
Yeah,
practice this like when we're doing our open water swim training around town. We can practice this in our hotel rooms or our homes, taking the wetsuit on, putting the wetsuit on, taking it off. But you can't really simulate that timing chip being on the ankle unless you happen to have one at
yeah,
home, or maybe get creative with something different at home. But that I never think about it until all of a sudden, like, oh man, I've got all this neoprene bundled up around my ankle. It's clearly caught in
yeah,
the timing chip. And just like you said, all I can do is sit down, right? Not rush myself, not spike the heart rate, just finagle it off with my hands, take as long as it takes. And I'll get that time back, not letting my heart rate spike, right? Once I'm on the bike.
right.
And I've seen athletes, I know you've volunteered in Galveston, like I volunteered in Galveston, 70.3 Gulf Coast, Texas, or Galveston, Texas. I've had athletes that know who we are, come up to me and while I'm volunteering in transition. Andrew, help me get my wetsuit off. And exactly, there's no peelers there. And so they just hit the deck
Yeah,
in transition. We know what we're doing. So we rip their wetsuit off, hand it to them, and they go.
takes whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes. Joe, I'm going to add this is not in the official marks, but I'm going to call this the unofficial bonus swim problem number 8. What do you tell an athlete to do if they're in their wetsuit and they got to pee? They got to go to the bathroom. No, you can be like you said, like
I,
sometimes you're queued up an hour before the race in your wetsuit. Sometimes, if it's going to take you an hour and 20 minutes, hour and 40 minutes to do the swim leg of the race, you're out there in the water and all of a sudden, man, I got to pee. What do you do? How do you relieve yourself once you're in that wetsuit?
I'm gonna tell you something, Andrew. I must be been in this sport way too long, or I've lost too much femininity in this sport, or I've raised 3 sons, and I just have, again, it's like when you wanted someone to talk about the ones and twos of triathlon. I didn't even understand why anybody would hesitate. I'm like, this is a major part of our race day. Guys, if you are standing in line at an Ironman and there is a full line of puddle underneath your feet, um, and no one has gotten in the water, there's your sign. Everyone has peed. Everyone has peed. Maybe it's because I've carried 3 big boy babies that it's not even an option for me. It becomes, oh, I guess I'm peeing. I mean, you don't even know at some points. Nerves are playing into that, anxiety. We've hydrated like crazy people for 3 days. Just let it go. Let it go. Just be free. I think it's much easier to pee when you're about to enter the water than when you're all nervous and in the middle of a swim stroke.
Yeah.
As far as it becomes the bigger problem is, how do I pee in the water? And for that, I've instructed a lot of my athletes. Most of the time, you've got to do breaststroke. You've got to
Yeah. You got to
relax
relax.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, because doing full stroke freestyle, it becomes very difficult to pee in the water. But it is a great opportunity if you can do a few strokes of breaststroke to go ahead and pee, so you don't have that urgency when you get into transition or onto the bike. Sorry if that's gross, but I
It's a
am
gross
who I
sport.
am.
It's a gross sport.